Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Hi.
I guess we still have a few more minutes. So I guess persons are trying to join. How was your week?
It was okay. I can't complain. What about you?
Well, as always, I was recuperating, had a setback with an accident. So
Well, yes, I did heard. How are you feeling?
coming on, feel much better.
That's good.
Yeah, so I think we should be able to, were you able to view the copies properly? I mean, it was too small, you weren't able, I think someone called to say that they weren't able to print it or something. You got the actual copies?
I did. Mine
Oh,
was actually mine was okay. I know some people probably can't. Um, their eyes may,
mm,
be a
okay.
little. But
So
mine.
that chapter 2 was pretty heavy. It was focusing a lot on re, um, the whole process of doing an inventory. And so for that, like I said, we are interested in the high level. We need to know what is an inventory, why we use it, and some of the details that go into conducting an inventory, right?
Okay.
So that goes in depth on what all has to be done. So it's good reference material. I think there's several I think there were several copies in relation to that particular chapter. So in the meantime, while we're waiting, I'll see if I can probably, I don't know, because there's zip files. So I don't know if I could drop it in the chat or maybe I may have to send it to the email. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds
Okay.
good.
All righty.
Use a small comb to break it down. This small comb. Yeah, about it. What you gonna take down?
Good evening, Miss McDonald. Okay, so far, 2 persons. We're still missing a few others. So we'll prepare to get started. Were you able to do your little research with regard to some of the what we call regulatory or legal requirements around certain record keeping rules? We had some persons, I think we had 2 persons that were going to do something based on the Bahamian scenario, and we had a few other students that were going to deal with examples from the US side. But we'll get started. Welcome, thank you. I just wanted to find out, how did you find your readings? Giving us that overview and setting the tone for why we need to do records management. Were you? Go ahead, McDonald.
Well, it was quite a bit of reading, quite a bit, and trying to understand the concept. It's really, you gotta really pay attention and just once you get the concept, everything should flow, but it's a lot of reading and trying to understand. And that's how it was for me.
And you, the good thing is, remember now, in the back, before the chapter ends, they give you some key points there. And I would say, make sure focus on those, and then you can still check what you've read over that wasn't quite clear.
Right.
If it doesn't help, then we can discuss it further.
Right.
But that first chapter primarily focused on the business case for records management, giving the definition, and also what all was involved in terms of from the side of principles, and then responsibilities at the end. So McDonald, you were ready to tell us a bit about your research for that particular regulation that you would have looked at.
Yes, I looked at my own was the Data Protection Act.
Right.
I think it's the 2008. And my own, well, the Data Protection Act was my own, and I noticed it's a difference between the protection, the commissioner, and the controller. So the Data Protection Act, it's really is a prohibition of transfer of personal data inside the Bahamas. Okay, and this act, it's broken down in four parts. The first part was the preliminary,
right,
which is the short title, meaning the name of the act and the interpretation of what it's all about. The crown to be bound, that means the regulations is the Bahamas basis related to the Bahamas and the act itself. And then the second part is the privacy of the individuals with regard to personal data. And the third part is the Data Protection Commissioner. To be very, very important. Right. And then you have the miscellaneous part.
Okay, so
it goes through,
in relation to record keeping,
right,
what did you notice, or can you give us some specific ones that stood out to you? Because you mentioned about the commissioner, and then it also talked about the roles, because you have your data controllers, etc. And it would have given you definitions for those as well, right? Right.
Right.
Okay.
The controller, the data
Mhm.
controller shall comply with the data for the information constituting the data
Mhm.
shall be, that should be collected by means which are lawful and fair
Mhm.
circumstances of the case.
Mhm.
And he have to make sure the data is accurate and
Right.
necessary and kept up to date.
Mhm.
The data shall be kept only for one or more specified and lawful purpose.
Mhm. So
And
that's
then,
right there where you say lawful purpose.
right,
Okay. So that gets into the fact that if you're a data controller, you're taking in information from people, from
right,
your clients, etc.
right.
Okay, you use it for what you were required to do.
To do, right,
Right. That data has now been processed, but it's
right,
still in your system.
right.
2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, you haven't touched it.
Mm-hmm.
So that right there is a red flag
Yeah,
because
it is
right,
unlawful.
right,
It's unlawful because it's
right.
supposed to be destroyed at a certain
Mhm.
time.
And when we talk about in the context of records management, that means you have to make sure you have a process in place
Right.
around people's personal data.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right.
So did it specify anything about penalties or fines?
Yeah, that comes in the miscellaneous portion. The
Mm,
the commissioner
mhm.
is to enforce all the data protection.
Right. So you have that set up. That's a an agency within itself, the data. So
Right.
and it's headed by the commissioner.
Right. It's headed by the commissioner, and he is selected by the House of Parliament. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
that. And then he have to give annual report to the House of Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
And his term is not to exceed 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing that goes right along with the election years.
Okay. So
And
so
then
so thanks for putting out for the rest of us. I saw Jada. She dropped off. Jada, are you here? She probably okay. I don't see her. So Tishelle, I don't have my list right in front of me, but you were here for the assigning of a specific regulation.
I actually wasn't.
Oh, so you didn't get, yeah,
This is
we were,
actually my first class
oh,
because I think they had a mix up with who was supposed to be in this course. So
oh, okay.
I'm just
Okay.
taking it all in and getting some notes in. I did had a idea about the homework and what it's all about, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
get to. I wasn't assigned
So
anything.
I need your email address then, eh? So I
I go.
could,
I spoke with Mr. Pratt and he gave
oh, okay.
me um he gave
My email address?
yes, and I gave
Oh,
him my
okay.
correct email address.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, I mean, I am not sure about the other persons, but we don't want to wait there because I still have to make up that other class. And so let me, I have some notes. I have some, I can share my screen with the text thing. Let me just make sure I have it with me and we can go through it in case there were things that were not clear. But we had persons that were looking at um, some of the US related legislation and regulations.
yeah.
And so someone was supposed to be doing, I think, SOX, and that is one that's related to the financial sector in the US. Okay, there was HIPAA, which was a US law regarding the privacy of personal health information. So we can, if they join later, they can also share. But for the most part, I want us to, I put in the chat the poster that I had shared with where if it was a record, were you able to look at that and see what the characteristics of record formally when we want to make that determination on what is a record? Were you able to review that?
Was that the blue sheet, the one with the?
Right, right. So since we can go over that, seeing that we have an Ms. Grant joining us for the first time. Actually, Ms. Grant, can you introduce yourself for us, please? So I can have an idea of where.
Okay, well, my name is Tashelle Grant. I employed at the Bahamas Law Enforcement Credit Union currently. And I don't know what else to say. Your mic is muted.
Oh, sorry. I was asking if you knew Jada.
Yes, but I'm actually at the Freeport office and she's in the Nassau office, but I do know Jada.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
You can go ahead.
Yeah, I decided to enroll in this course, just to get a better understanding of, dealing with records and how it should be managed and what all is needed, what's important, and things like that. So I thought it was a good course to enroll in. So I'm just looking forward to it. Not sure what to expect as yet, but so far I think it's going to be okay.
Okay, but like we said in the previous class, the management of your records helps to tie in with being able to achieve your goals and objective. That's enterprise-wide. Okay, basically your business generates information and you use that information to make decisions, and also you use that information as evidence of your business transactions. So without the records, where's the business? Because it's through doing that business that you generate the records or the information. And then if you look at the is it a record poster, you will see that what we're making a determination on is based on a number of questions, inquiries. Okay, so you're all able to view it, right? You've seen it?
Yeah, I have a printout of it, Miss.
Okay, I think I'll put it up so we can go through it and just get a better feel for.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Unfortunately, it says I'm unable to share. That's weird. I'll try again. No, I'm unable to share for whatever reason, but I'll still go through it. So in terms of making that determination, we have to look at a number of factors. Did we generate or receive that information to conduct business? If we did, then we would have to elevate it to record status. Did the record originate somewhere else, but we were responsible for taking action? If the answer is yes, it's a record. Does the information that we have generated document some type of a function or policy or decision, procedures, operations? Is it related to the ultimate mission of the organization, projects or activities? If we can answer that with a yes, then definitely it's a record. Does the material relate to business, some type of organizational business, or it's a copy that we don't have anywhere else, but it's definitely related to organizational business? If it's that, then we would say yes. So before we can even get into records management, we have to be able to have certain criteria in place to allow us to determine what's a record and what's not a record. The basic questions in terms of non-records would be those type of documents that do not have substantive comments, or they're draft documents and it's not the final version. They were like in initial iterations when we were getting started. So it's not the final product. Then we would say that's a non-record. Okay, the material has been published, or it's process information received and used just for reference purposes, then it's not a record. Because, you know, sometimes we get information from other sources. We read through it, do research, and then we get into creating a document based on the information we use. So that reference material that we were just looking at to compile our particular document would not be considered the record. So if we have things that, like I said, no action has to be taken, it's only to maybe convey a message or just for maybe a reference purpose. Maybe in the office they're doing, the facilities department is indicating they will have to turn the water off in the building or something, but it's just what we would call note, general for your information notes, then we won't treat that as a record. Junk mail or non-work related information definitely falls into that category of non-records. Okay, so ultimately, once we determine what our records are, then we get into the meat of managing those records, because just like humans have a life cycle, records also have a definite life cycle. Okay, so that particular document that was sent out. I also sent some other documents with the life cycle image. Were you able to review those? Any questions on those in terms of the different uses and stages?
I wrote my own, Ms. Tucker. I'm trying to find it.
Okay, go ahead, take your time.
There was a question I had on it.
Okay, so we're gonna go through this evening. I wanted to start preparing the retention schedules, but I want to go back just to the summary of that first chapter with regard to the records management business. Okay, the different components.
Yeah. Okay, I found it. I had the question on it. We'll go over it. So
you could, yeah, go
like,
ahead.
It's like the life cycle. When, who decides at what, how many years you should,
Keep a record.
yeah, it's like some people, some companies are like 5 years, some people like 7, some like 10.
Okay,
And it's like,
yeah. So
like
that's,
that's a lot of paper.
right, and that's what we should be looking at tonight in terms of when we talk about doing an inventory and what it all encompasses. So in terms of deciding about the length of time to keep a record, that's a collaborative decision. So once there's an executive support for you to establish within your organization a records management program,
Mm-hmm.
what should happen is you should have like you would have more like a committee, a records committee, and
Right.
that would consist of representatives probably from your IT department, from your legal department, from your audit department, from your
Right.
finance department.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, once you do, because the process is before you can attach a time frame
Right.
to records, you have to do your, what I would call in the records area, your due diligence in terms of going and doing an assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and basically when you set up a records management program, that entails having the support so that you can identify the roles and responsibilities that persons within the organization will have to play.
Right.
So ultimately you would need that top level executive sponsor, which would
Mm-hmm.
be like your CEO, depending on what type of organization you're in, or if you're in a government agency, the
Right.
person's ultimately responsible for that unit, department, or area
Right.
that would play a key role in providing the necessary support and helping with the resources needed.
Right.
So you would need to have that particular team
Mm-hmm.
look at what records your department, your unit, your area generates during the course of your business. And so
Right.
you identify. Now the thing is, we because we're in this era where there's it's driven more towards creation of less paper. Most of our information now is being created digitally.
Right.
So we have born digital information,
Right.
whereas for those persons who may still be transitioning some information, they may still be receiving in paper format. So this assessment allows you to look at the particular area based on the records being created in that area. You would have to basically get a list. You would have to look at the volume, who is responsible, who's the ultimate owner of that record. Because with some processes you have a process that may be touched by maybe 2 or more departments, but ultimately when that is signed off and approved, who is supposed to hold that final part of the record? So by doing the inventory, it's like you're looking at all of these things, where they're located, the volume of the record, who is supposed to have access to this information. All of that goes into ultimately determining how long you will have to keep it. So some of the guidelines that persons look at would be
Mm-hmm.
like what sector they're in, the industry sector, general standard guidelines, maybe from financial standpoints. So sometimes you would see by default 7 years, because in a lot of instances where the courts may have stipulation in terms of evidence. And so the 7-year time frame is pretty standard. However, you can have, and these time frames are expressed as minimum. Okay, so in assessing how long you have to keep a record, you're basically determining that minimum time frame, and it's not set in stone, because this document, in terms of doing the assessment and ultimately ending up with a retention schedule, means that you have to do a review. Okay, so it could be processes may not be changing as quickly as every year. So you can put in most instances, usually for reviews, they can go at a minimum of maybe every 2 years, some up to 5 years sometimes, depending on, like I say, what sector you're in. So the time frames themselves are derived from collaborative conversations with your major stakeholders, the owners of the records, which would be like your department head, manager, along with people from the legal department who would have that knowledge about what types of legislation impact your particular area. Audit, because the audits are conducted to ensure things are operating the way they should be. And so usually for audits, there may be a set time frame that your transactional records have to be kept, so that once audit has reviewed them, then you can contemplate having them sent for disposition. So the actual time frames are agreed time frames that would be set based on your business needs, any legal or regulatory requirements. And also you have another component, archival or historical reasons. Some organizations, they have very strong historical significance. So if you're in an institution where there's prone to be that need for knowledge of that institution down the road, you definitely want to look at types of records that would fit that criteria. And basically giving archival value is primarily done by an archivist. So that's somebody trained for that. So the information management discipline is very broad. So you have persons like yourself, McDonald, who you're right in the crux with the electronic information. You have persons, right, that may be doing they're keen on assessing records for historical value. Then you can also have persons who are dealing with information from the standpoint of privacy and protection. So over the years, as we have pretty much moved along the path to becoming fully digitized, we see a lot of evolving new professions. Okay, so from the start of our readings, it pretty much gave you an understanding of components related to why records management. So anything stuck out to you with regard to why, in terms of why do we need to do this? What are some of the benefits?
Well, actually, I was surprised that how detailed. I didn't know it was like so important of this function. I said, if we don't have this, the whole whole organization is totally lost. Example, if you're looking for something, let's say is looking for something that he entrusted it to us, and we can on a timely basis even.
Mm-hmm.
That shows it credits the whole organization, and
Right.
they says anymore, all of that, and every single piece of document is so valuable, so important. So it's amazing. I'm finding out a lot of stuff.
Okay, so we see that a lot of people, because what gets the priority, sometimes it depends. You have businesses that are for profit, you have businesses that are not for profit, you have the government agencies, and they're big, their biggest importance in terms of they're for the people and service of the people. So, having that information to make those decisions for the country is so important that we can't afford to. And that's, I guess, where we would get into the scenarios, especially around election time, of the name calling and and all this thing, but who hide what and
Yeah, that's what
etc.
that's what I say with the Data Protection Act. They know that ain't.
you know. So I think because of what we've been experiencing
The
as
culture.
right,
Yeah.
it's becoming so important now because everybody, the transparency is so
Right.
important. And in this chapter, there's something that's very important because it spoke about generally accepted record keeping principles. And they named them, and they basically gave you a little snippet on what they are. And that those principles were promulgated by the Association of Records Managers and Administrators. It's a professional group for persons in the records management discipline. So it has these principles, and then it's basically a maturity model. So you look at the principles, and then there's a rating in terms of if you're at a level 1 or level 2, a level 3, a level 4, or a level 5, etc. So in that chapter, definitely you need to pay attention to that, because that's an important concept to be aware of. So the easiest way for you to remember that is if you think of this acronym, TIP card, okay? And that'll give you all of those components, because the or the A stands for accountability. The T is transparency. The I is integrity. The P is protection. Okay, and then it goes on. You have your C for compliance. Okay, then you have your A in terms of accuracy. You have your R, and that represents retention, and your D for disposition. Okay, so that concept in itself is very important, because in terms of when you're in or you're a part of a records management program, or you're developing, you have to ensure that you have the process and controls that bring forward these core ideals that I just mentioned. So that if you have your, you saw that in your notes, right? You could make sure.
Yeah, I have that, Mr.
Right, right.
Yeah, I have
So
that.
if you found that, just make sure you highlight those. And like I say, that's the acronym I gave you, is an easy way to remember that. The beginning of the chapter pretty much showed you how the term was defined by various dictionaries or resource materials. There's also the main definition that's given in one of the international standards, so that the reference to ISO 15489, that's also a document that you can look at, because a lot of the standards that go into developing a program fall out of what that particular standard says. And there are numerous standards that tie into the whole concept of records management, because you're dealing also with electronic records. So there's the need to ensure proper indexing and classification. You have to ensure there's the necessary controls around that. And so the programs themselves develop from the stipulations based on those standards. Okay, so the main part.
One question before you go on.
Okay.
On the material that you gave us, I started to read, right? And sometimes I look at, it gave reference like to America and Canada and all that. We have to know.
No, I won't. That's just to show you, because the thing with those countries,
right,
the national level, they have instituted legislation around general record keeping for government, and primarily for government, but it's also fleshed out into private entities as well. So it gives you, it helps you to compare, and you can look around and see that for our country, there's still that need for developing in this area, because those companies have taken it. I mean, those countries are so serious about it. They have national legislation, so you know what to do in relation to your responsibilities for record keeping at a national level. You know, so there and the thing is, you know, even if you look around here, and based on COVID, pretty much forced a lot of institutions, including the government, to find other ways of conducting their business, because you couldn't interact the way we normally do. So that's why the proliferation of the digital processes and digital means of conducting business. Whereas before, you know, primarily everything was just working with the paper. So it's even more important now that record keeping standards are put in place, because you're now operating primarily using digital means. Okay, and whereas, you know, with the paper processes may be a bit slower, but when it comes down to having to find something, it's easier to find that physical paper, because you could, I mean, it may take a longer time, but you could go in that file room and dig up and see. When you have things in electronic form, and the system go out or whatever, that's a big issue. You know, so then you have to develop more strategies around continuity. If your systems fail, what other mode of operation, where do you go, etc. So there are conceptual foundations, so that although companies and government agencies have been creating and maintaining records, quantity, variety, and complexity of the information has significantly increased. Okay, so in terms of operations, government operations continue to expand and increase. We have complexity of enterprises in the commercial and industrial area. You know, we have a lot of growth in terms of non-for-profit sector even. So all of these relate to the need to keep records. Okay, and for those principles actually speak to the quality of your program, you know, so that has to be, that whole process of from you create that record to when you eventually get rid of that record requires a specific type of a process. So your creation, if your creation is no longer coming from receipt of paper into the organization, now, like I said, because of COVID, a lot of things had to be emailed into organizations. Okay, so that email comes in, it's just not to just float around and do whatever. That you have to have controls and processes in place to identify who's responsible for incoming emails and clearing them out of the system to make sure they get into the workflow and go to who they're supposed to go to. So it's become more complex, but the principles are still there. The basics are still there. So in the physical world, you know, you had all your file cabinets for persons who came from the government agencies. They would call them registries. So you had your staff working there. They were responsible when mails came in. They had to open them, make sure they go to the proper persons. They were responsible when mails were being sent out to make sure they got recorded. Okay, if clients were coming and they had to be seen by an officer, they were responsible to make sure go and retrieve that file and get it to that officer so that they can get the information.
Yeah.
So that whole process still stands. It's just that it has to be done a bit differently if you've now moved into the electronic environment. And so those cabinets, they would have lock, or the room would be locked. You would have a sign saying authorized personnel. That was
Only,
in an area
yeah.
to hide, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what we're trying to get used to now, that the fact that may no longer be in working with the paper process, but records management still has to occur, even though we're in a new environment. Yeah, so it's just that difference. So when you think about why it's important, it's still the same. Okay, you want to be able to work efficiently, so you don't want to have to be digging up and down to find a letter. You don't want confidential information to go to anyone. So the program itself um, works towards making sure you're established. You have to train as well. Once you decide on what your rules and procedures are for your records management program, there's constant training and awareness. Okay, so persons coming into your organization, they should not just come in and nobody tells them what to do in relation to the information or the records they're creating or using. So that's a part of the records management program, your training for persons coming in, so that there's an orientation process, and they tell them about their benefits, and they tell them about the do's and don'ts, probably as it relates to conduct, you know. But do they even mention what is the responsibilities in terms of the handling the information that they're creating or sharing? If your organization has routine training or bring awareness to persons in that regard, it's great, it's excellent, you know. But primarily it's been a back end function, and because it started off, like I said, primarily dealing with paper records, it's kind of tended to be ignored. But when things happen and you need that information and you can't produce it, then you see things differently. Okay, so today records management is multifaceted. So you have professional practitioners in, like I said, various disciplines because of the way information is evolving and moving into the digitized environment. New skills are required to manage it. So while records management has its own well-defined body of concepts, its principles, policies, and procedures, ideas and practices from related disciplines also come into play. So computing, there's the new terminology, information governance, and sometimes people tend to say to use information governance and records management in one breath, but no, they're different disciplines. Records management would be a subset of information governance because that is taken into play. It's like the umbrella unit. To govern information, you have to have records management policies in place. You also have to make sure you're securing that information properly, okay? So there are other disciplines involved in the actual governance. You have your people resources, you have your access controls, all of that are part of making sure there's governance around the information. So the actual principles and practices for records management would have developed as a response to the information related activities we see today and the need for systematic approaches. Okay, so concepts that really stick out, we have to know who owns the records. Okay, so the organization itself ultimately owns every record that is created. Never mind, you are engaged in a particular department which has certain duties and tasks and functions. You don't take those records at the end of the day. If you leave and say these what I do and these what I create and pack them up in your bag and go.
Oh, that's the government people that do that. The government people, you can't touch what does this?
Oh no.
Yes.
And see we what do we say? There needs to be that awareness. So if you don't have a program, you know, people, that's the way they will think.
That's
you
what
know,
they think.
yeah. But you're working for that organization. The work you're doing generates information that the organization needs, okay? Because it has mandates to fulfill. Okay, so you need to know that because in the US, some companies on your way out, just so you have the exit interview, they make sure you've turned over your files, your records, etc., to your supervisor, or they hold your pay. But that's how serious it is in, like I say, major jurisdictions that have put in place national record keeping rules and regulations. But for us, I say give us some time. We'll get there. After all the little circuses and things, because I always find it interesting because because I'm aware of a lot of the stipulations with regard to ensuring information or records is managed properly. Sometimes I would see things and I would just snip a picture. So I know one day I was driving home and this law firm whose name shall not be called had this room open with all the boxes and all the records open facing the road, nobody in sight, nobody in view, just the room pile up with all the information. And I was like,
wow,
that's a risk, that's a red flag. You can't, and then that also speaks to how you perceive the information, because a lot of times there's this thing that out of sight, out of mind. So because it's not an active record, they don't take the necessary precautions. So they would say, oh, we finished with these inactive, and they would push them in places that are not up to standard. When you go further in your readings, I'll try and make sure send those, because they're kind of big. So I don't know if that will work with sending it through the chat. So but you'll see when we talk about inactive records and how options for managing them. These particular facilities have stringent requirements. There are standards for any vendor that decides to engage in the business of storage of corporate information. So you just can't pick one old building, what by the side of one cafeteria, and a lot of people always passing it, because you increase the risk that somehow somebody could break in the building and go through the information, or there could be a fire, or you could end up with pest infestations. And all of these are risks that are possible if the records are not managed properly. Okay, even going digitally has its own risks, because you could have had that system there for years and people still going in it and using the information. However, no support exists anymore for that system. Okay, and sometimes over time, the information literally, the media literally is obsolete. You can't access it anymore. And so if you didn't do your due diligence in managing it and having it migrated to an updated system, it's lost. So all of these are things that factor into the whole process of proper records management. So another incident was another law firm. They moved and somebody decided to dispose of garbage on an abandoned lot. But guess what was in that garbage? Applications, persons who applied. So when I came and saw it, people's picture on their application in this old yard.
Oh my God.
This is not a time for your personal information to be
Right.
just flowing. You have a lot of people that have what I call dark mind intent.
Yep.
So all I can say is things like this is because persons are not aware. You just cannot do that. And so things like data protection, etc., that's where you have to then bring in laws to make people accountable when they are responsible for information of a sensitive nature. But like I say, one time I was walking downtown to a particular bank that shall remain nameless, was using, after they had moved, they was using that building for like a storage. So they had all the boxes thrown there, but there was nothing shielding the glass, etc. So the files was open up and stuff like that. You could walk by, see the person name and stuff like that.
Wow.
They are definite no-nos. And that definitely speaks to the fact that there's no management for your inactive records. And there has to be, because at the end of the day, some records you still have, although you're not using them as often, because they are attached to what we call legal or regulatory requirements. So if you have to keep that record for 7 years, right? You send it off-site. It's year 5, okay? We're prone to hurricanes, and we've been having some of the worst recently, right? So you just say, well, send it to whatever, because you don't have an what we would call a standard vendor. You're basically just using a storage space. So hurricane come and flood out the place, and then during all this commotion and the flooding and stuff, you didn't try to restore any records. Everything just got thrown out because they say it was wet and it wasn't no good. But that contained records for a client who has a claim. And so what you gonna tell them? The record ain't there no more and that's it? And that person's livelihood or their life or their interest is at stake? So even though the record is inactive, it still requires a duty of care because you have attachments related to regulatory requirements. And I just like to say maybe primarily because nowadays, we've been getting a lot of attention with regard to banking and fraud and money laundering and all these type of things. Okay, so given the fact that in banks, you have to know your customer, and in most financial institutions like that, that's a priority to know your customer. And there are minimum requirements for certain types of customer information that you collect. So it's a minimum requirement. However, if based on your business practices, you see that although that minimum requirement is 5 years, I still need this for another 2 years because of X, Y, Z. So when you make up your retention schedule, that's where you would get like 7 years, you see? Because then you would increase the time frame that you needed because your business need outweighs the legal requirement. So those are the type of things that you would be looking at when you do an assessment, identify what records you have, their use, any attachment to any legal or regulatory requirements. That's how you get to factor in and come up with a time frame for that, you see? So very important that we are aware. So that's why I wanted to persons to just do some of the little research around some of the regulations and stuff that we have locally as well as internationally, so you would see the difference, and like I say, for some of the developed countries that have established the highest level national rules and regulations around it, they're very serious. You can get serious fines and jail time in relation to doing things untowards with regard to information. And especially if you're in highly regulated fields like securities, those type of financial sector operations, as well as there's a big thing now around privacy. So there's also in the European scenario, they have what is called GDPR. And so what that has implications for us as well, because if we're dealing with European citizens from the EU, whatever information or data we are collecting on them, we have to make sure it's in line with that particular regulation. So you during the course of time, we may refer to some of what that is. And so there are certain rights for the individual, and the fines for persons who breach that is pretty hefty. So if you check Facebook and Google, they have been fined in recent times for infractions, so you could do some search and GDPR, the GDPR information with regard to use of European citizens in data. Okay, the US is very litigious, like I said last time. So they have quite a lot of laws and requirements around their information. Any of you recall the big stint when Hillary Clinton was around and she was using
Personal
Right,
email.
right, okay. So email is another one with smoking guns, and basically what has happened over time, persons email, that's not a record, but it's what you put in the email that makes it get to the level of a record. So if you're using the email for just casual conversations, maybe for lunch or to tell somebody about a meeting or whatever, once that message, because email basically was a communicative device, pretty much for communication. Okay, so it made it easier. And you would have persons attaching corporate documents, you would have persons writing in relation to disputes and stuff in the message of the email, so anything that we would have looked at earlier, and you can answer yes, yes, yes. If you created an email and that says yes, that email has to then be saved as a record, okay, and put into wherever you store your corporate records. So that would mean once that email, somebody put in something about a policy change, or if you have a lawsuit and somebody says something in connection with that case or that matter, you would then have to save that email as a record, okay, which means you would go to the file, save as, give it the relevant name, and put it in the repository related to that information. So there's so many things that we have to be careful now in terms of managing information. The other thing, didn't someone say they was going to look at freedom of information? But that's okay. Because that, that's pending. And so the government has already appointed someone as the commissioner for that office. I'm not hearing much about it as yet, so I guess they're making sure they're getting their frameworks together. But that will impact significantly those government institutions or public agencies where people want to know information, and they would be able to go and request that information. Now, granted, some information, because of the nature of it, not everything would be what we would call free to disclose. Definitely there would be, especially information of a national security interest. You just can't go just because it's in place for you to ask at agencies or request information. You would know beforehand what is on or off the table, okay? But with that being said, it brings into play the fact that when you go and request information from these various agencies, they are stipulated by law to respond to you in a certain period of time, okay? That means these agencies definitely have to ensure they have a records management program in place that identifies who will be dealing with the records, that can speak to what records are being created in the various agencies and their location, okay? Because that involves changing to the point that you have to identify specific people for that function, okay? And those people then have to be knowledgeable enough to know the type of information being requested has to go to Department B. So there has to be liaisons in place to look for that information, then has to be vetted by the legal team before it's released to make sure, everything's in order. And you have 30 days to do it. So go ahead, McDonald.
Okay, I have a question. What's the difference between that then with the Data Protection Act and the Freedom of Information Act? What's the
Well, the Data Protection Act, that speaks to the rights, the privacy, the rights of the individual. If you're collecting personal data, personally identifiable information. So that's like your name, where you live, your phone number, your national insurance number, you know, that type of thing, driver's license, etc. Whereas, right, so those, the Data Protection Act speaks to ensuring whoever has to collect information from persons are responsible. They only use it for the purpose that it was intended. You can't store it and then go back later digging up to go do something else.
Right.
You only use it for that purpose that it was given to you for. Whereas with the Freedom of Information Act, what that seeks to do, like we say, the I can't remember what this song with KB have for the election and all that, but you know, when that silly season come out, right? Everybody's have a bit of information
On
that they
somebody.
want clarified, right?
Right.
So they maybe if they won't go to finance or they won't go down to, or if they're talking about people nationality and they won't go to the Ministry of Immigration and Employment or somewhere, you know, within parameters, they can ask specific questions, whether in relation to that particular ministry's role or duties. Some questions people maybe, you know, now it's mainly about funds and who get what funds and et cetera and that type of thing. So they may ask for reports or on, like I remember during the hurricane, you know, remember when it was, they were saying about the monies that the bank would hold and then they turn it over to the central bank because the persons didn't go to the bank in years or what have you. So it became a dormant account, you know, so stuff like that, you know, people may want information on. And like I say, once this frameworks is all set, you would pretty much have an idea of the type of information that you can have access to. So pretty much with the freedom of information, that's giving the public access to government information that has been declared public. Go ahead, McDonald. I see your hand still up.
And yeah, so do you have confidence in this Freedom of Information Act? Do you think it's going to be right and just for everybody, or think it's just for a certain select few?
Like I say,
you know how the Bahamas go.
Is you shouldn't, no government should be, if you have, like now, what's the one topical they're talking about now, this whole food program, and the fact that, oh well, they were saying persons weren't volunteers, they got paid and stuff like that, right? So pretty much under the Freedom of Information Act, you're looking at persons inquiring probably about a public project and who is responsible and, you know, that type of thing. So it's basically the public avenue to gain information on government business. Like I say, within the confines of what is public and what wouldn't interfere with national security interests or be a danger if it's known.
So we can't get that same information from the Registrar General as opposed to like to business related, if you like you want to find out who the shareholders and
well,
stuff.
that's for companies. That's for companies, right? But if somebody wanted to inquire in terms of, like I was talking about this whole act, the whole thing about what was happening with the food feeding program and stuff like that, they may want to know pretty much things like if they wanted questions about how many people were actually assisted and different things like that. So it's just to provide that like I say, the two main features in that act is accountability and transparency, so that the business of government is open for the public to query and have access to the information on. And with the data protection, it's just ensuring that all entities that collect information or personal data are responsible to manage it in accordance with that law. So they should have in place the necessary processes to use it and then dispose of it and make sure it's kept confidential. You know, in the US, they have lots more regulations and law that relate to specific sections. Like I say, I don't know, I don't recall if somebody had HIPAA, but that relates to your medical information. And the fact that you should have access to your medical information, and the fact that whoever has your medical records manages it with the utmost care and respect and confidentiality. So your medical records isn't out there for, because you know some people just collect your information and sell it, right?
Yeah.
You know, okay. They and that's more like a marketing strategy, so they know
Especially
what you,
businesses, for
okay,
businesses and stuff.
yeah, right. So there are laws and things in place, and basically, I don't know if you would have noticed, but ever since they came out with that GDPR regulation for European citizens, a lot of times before you could click and go on website and different things, they cannot just, they have to have you agree to accept, because you know they'd be taking cookies to know where your machine is and all that other type of data on where, and your preferences in terms of when you go to their site, etc. So they cannot be doing that without permission. And because you have people from all over the world using the internet, etc. Now when you go to certain sites, you would get a little pop-up, and you either have to accept all cookies, or you could limit what information they could gather from you. Y'all ain't noticed that? But a lot of times now, especially if you have to research and you're going to different websites and stuff like that, because you know when you go there, they be tracking you.
Yeah, I stop and I tried to pull some stuff on this record management, and they want you to sign and click.
Right, they want you to say
another
that
site,
yeah, you know. So all of these are some of the results of more prudent practices with regard to managing people's information. Nice, Jada, you don't want to share with us what you found? I think you had an interesting one. You had the one for the USA.
Yes, ma'am, I had socks.
Yeah, you had socks, and that's interesting because that relates to financials, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so McDonald gave us her information on with regard to data protection. So we could take some time and you can share a bit, because that's something that's international. But like I say, although it's international, in some way it trickles into and impacts us as well. So you want to share, Jada?
Okay, let me pull it up from my email,
Okay.
because I had emailed it to you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw your the email.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
So I researched the Sarbanes-Oxley Act.
Right.
Is it Sarbanes?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
right pronunciation.
Okay, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, often called SOX or Sarbox, is a US law meant to protect investors from fraudulent accounting activities by corporations. SOX mandates certain practices in financial record keeping and reporting for corporations. This act was passed due to the accounting scandals at Enron, WorldCom, Global Crossing, Tyco, and Arthur Andersen that resulted in billions of dollars in corporate and investor losses. The act implemented new rules for corporations, such as setting new auditor standards to reduce conflicts of interest and transferring responsibility for the complete and accurate handling of financial reports. The act deters fraud and misappropriation of corporate assets. The act imposes harsher penalties with violators. The SOX changed management's responsibility for financial reporting significantly. The act requires that top managers personally certify the accuracy of financial reports. If a top manager knowingly or willfully makes a false certification, they can face between 10 to 20 years in prison. If the company is forced to make a required accounting restatement due to management's misconduct, top managers can be required to give up their bonuses or profits made from selling the company's stock. If the director or officer is convicted of a securities law violation, they can be prohibited from serving in the same role at the public company. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act imposes harsher punishment for obstructing justice, securities fraud, mail fraud, and wire fraud. The maximum sentence term for securities fraud was increased to 25 years, while the maximum prison time for the obstruction of justice was increased to 20 years. The act increased the maximum penalties for mail and wire fraud from 5 years of prison time to 20. Also, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act significantly increased the fines for public companies committing the same offense. On July 30th, 2014, the Securities and Exchange Commission announced charges against the CEO and the former CFO of a Florida-based computer equipment company for misrepresenting to external auditors and the investing public state of its internal controls over financial reporting. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002 requires a management report on internal controls over financial reporting to be included in a company's annual report. The CEO and CFO must sign certifications confirming they've disclosed all significant deficiencies to the outside auditors, review the annual report, and attest to its accuracy. The SEC's Enforcement Division alleges that CEO Mark Sherman and former CFO Edward Cummings represented in a management's report accompanying the fiscal year 2008 annual report for QSGI Inc. that Sherman participated in management's assets assessment of the internal controls. However, Sherman did not actually participate. The Enforcement Division further alleges that Sherman and Cummings each certified that they had disclosed all significant deficiencies in internal controls to the outside auditors. On the contrary, Sherman and Cummings misled the auditors, chiefly by withholding that inadequate inventory controls existed within the company's Minnesota operations. They also withheld from auditors and investors that Sherman was directing and Cummings participating in a series of maneuvers to accelerate the recognition of certain inventory and accounts receivable in their books and records by up to a week at a time. The improper accounting maneuvers, which rendered QSGI's books and records inaccurate, were performed in order to maximize the amount of money that the company could borrow from its chief creditor. According to the SEC's orders, Sherman and Cummings signed a Form 10K and Sherman signed a Form 10K/A, each containing the false management's report on internal controls over financial reporting. And each signed certifications required under Section 302 of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, in which they falsely represented that they had evaluated the report and disclosed all significant deficiencies to the auditors. The SEC, okay, I don't think that one is needed.
Okay,
Yes.
but yes, so if you were listening, right, although you're hearing things that the things was coming out as fraudulent, what they did and misappropriation, etc. The records provided what? The evidence. Okay. And so basically, when we think of records, we think of evidence, and it's evidence of what? Our business transactions, our business operations. Okay. So you can have lots of documents. Okay. But no, when we say documents, some elevate to the level of records. Okay. But the key for making sure we have records is the fact that they provide evidence. Okay, so that, and even when you go in to do your assessments in terms of your inventory of what's in the office, okay, you're gonna come up with lots of and records cannot only be paper or electronic. You have records on other medias. Okay, the recordings, they're records as well. So all of this to say, once it's a record, whatever format is in, we have to manage it. Okay. So that particular and so when we think about that case with Arthur Anderson and Enron, the accounting firm. Okay, so it involved that whole process of auditing and then trying to cover up stuff. Okay, and so the big thing for them, the fact that they were shredding evidence. And what is the evidence? The records. Okay, so that sent them sailing. Okay, you can't, and that's important. That's one of the components in a records management program. You have to have in place that process for managing what they call legal holes. So if your company is in situations where you have to go to court, every and anything related to that matter has to be put on hold, meaning nobody can process anything further on that. You have to basically make sure all those records are like frozen in time so that they can then be actioned accordingly after the matter is over. So you have to have a process in place where you get it out to every section of your department, your agency, that records related to XYZ are under litigation. Nothing is to be processed, to be destroyed, to be actioned in relation to that matter. So when we talk about records management, that's a part of it. Making sure you have in place a process to enforce a legal hold. The courts definitely, and so when we go further, you will see how inventorying your records and creating a record schedule work to your advantage. Okay, because if you have a records program in place and you have gone through the assessment and you have a retention schedule, that is your basically, that's your guidance to show that this is what we go by. The records have been identified in our organization. We only have need of them for 5, 10, 15 years. After that point, they are assessed. If there's no longer any further need for them, then we destroy them. But you can't do that haphazardly. So when you have a program and you implement a records retention schedule, you have to consistently follow that so that even if you are confronted with a legal situation, okay, and maybe some of that information may have fallen into the category for destruction, and that would have been done prior to your knowledge of this pending litigation around that matter, you would get a more favorable view from the courts because they could see it's an established program, you know. But what was done by the that whole Enron scandal was knowingly destroying information, and you're under investigation. So there again, in terms of benefits, that's one of the things that's a part of the records management program. Implementing that ensures that you are covered in the event you have to go to court on a matter, and some of the items would have been things that you routinely in a normal course of business have documented for destruction. But you can't, and if you even know that, say you have a customer and y'all had some big issue and she already said, I'm gonna carry y'all to court, that's even a flag that XYZ customer records and information on hold. If anything was up to destroy, don't do it anymore. This may be a legal action. Okay. So in terms of the benefits of records management, that would have been also mentioned in your readings for that first chapter. Anyone would wish to share some of the benefits that they would have read about?
I can't find the exact page, but I know it mentions it's time, it saves you a lot of time if all the records are in place. Instead of, like you say, if you can't find something, you got to go digging for it, especially if it's computerized. And a lot of people have that culture of having to run to the file and find it. It's you know, it speeds up the process, and that's one of them I remember.
Yes, that's a good point. So having that in place, it's a benefit for corporate memory, okay?
Right.
Because you document your past activities and provide information for future events. So your background data, your planning, your marketing program information, okay? A lot of those would need past information to develop the strategy going forward. So in terms of documenting your corporate memory, that's definitely something that's important. Okay, we also get as a plus, it helps to safeguard what we call vital records. Okay, and vital records would be those records that relate to operations in the event of a disaster or something. And so it's like your business continuity, your recovery from the disaster. Okay, so like with COVID, people couldn't go into the office, you know, so there were certain things that needed to be in place in order for people to work from home. So certain records, you couldn't physically access them. So those vital records, if they were already identified, something process would have had to be in place so that you can have access to them digitally, you know. But in order to safeguard them, you have to know what they are. So that in terms of your fact finding, when you do your assessments and you go into the various areas, that's like one of those components that you would be responsible for identifying as you go to the various, what's vital, what do you need to ensure in the face of a disruption, because you know it could be that disruption don't only have to be from hurricane. You know, look at in the States, you see these shootings and different things that's happening, you know, any unforeseen, it could be a terrorist attack, you know, but the thing is to give the thought in your program to identify those particular records and then to develop proper strategies around ensuring that in the event something happens, we can access these. For some people, they may still want to have duplicate copies at another location, you know, but there are different strategies, you know. Cloud technology is out, so a lot of people may save certain records to the cloud. So even if you have those disasters, once you can get to a functioning machine, etc., you're able to tap into that cloud and get access to your information and get up and running again. So some people in the past, microfilming was their strategy. So they would, the documents that for them was vital, they would make sure they microfilm those. And so you have your regular use tape and you have your main master stored somewhere else. So when we look at safeguarding vital records, it's not only those records that, for vital, it means anything you need once a disaster happened to resume again, you know? So vital could also be in different categories because your historical information about when the organization got started, all that basic stuff, you would need that. You wouldn't want anything happen to that. So yes, that's vital. But in the event of a disaster, you're not going to go to that first. So vital records also involve having to prioritize them. You would need your records up and running to know about your staff, your employees. You would need to be able to contact the team members that your plan indicates are to be first off the ground in assessing what happened to your facility, you know. So that's also a very important part of, and provides benefits in a records management program. And so also in terms of that efficiency and operational effectiveness, it results from the ability to provide control around creation and growth of the information. Because as we can see today, information continues to grow exponentially. So that whole life cycle process, the retention schedule, all of that helps to manage the growth of the information. Granted, you're looking at heavy costs, having to buy file cabinets, etc. Now you're storing it electronically. There's lots of storage space, you know, but you can still run into inefficiencies if you don't have them indexed and tagged properly, and you don't want to spend a whole lot of time on your computer trying to search and find that information. You know, another benefit, regulatory compliance. Laws and regulations impose record-keeping requirements on various agencies and businesses. So if you're non-compliant, then you can end up getting hit with fines or face other legal consequences. And one of those would be like risk to your reputation if you're supposed to be a trusted institution or business. You know, so records management aids with that as well, being compliant, because you would then have to identify those laws and regulations that impact the records you're creating. And like we said, with litigation, okay, it helps to cut down on all the risk involved and facing penalties, because you know you have a process in place to ensure the holds are placed when you're faced with litigation. So routine practices, procedures, and methods help to curb that liability that could occur if you have litigation and you don't have a formal program that helps to form how you deal with that. Okay, and on the whole, if our offices are not organized and unprofessional, it impacts the business, it impacts the institution. Okay, it gives the public and your customers a poor perception. Okay, if you're unable to find what you're looking for. And it also results in just a whole lot of time wasting and frustration. Okay, so in terms of it, of all those things we've said, we definitely see that records are an asset, okay? Over the past, like I said, you know, generally persons didn't perceive it as that. But when you have cash and land and securities, do you just leave them knocking about willy-nilly? You don't check on them? What do you do with assets, with things that have value for you? You secure them, right? You make sure you know what you have. So basically, that's the same underlying precept around records, okay? If you're in banking, you know, there's a whole lot of controls around cash, right? You don't just have cash lying about. You're gonna have procedures. You gotta sign for this or you gotta do that. And it's locked, it's secure, it have cameras. So information is an important asset for the company. Information helps to make or break your attaining or reaching the mission and the vision and the goals that are mandated for your organization to achieve. If you don't have the information or the information is poorly created, then you won't reach that level of what we would call significance or importance needed, and the information wouldn't be trustworthy. And that's the main thing. You want to ensure your information is accurate. So I have a video I want to show basically about the profession. Just a minute. I'm still unable to share. So I'll try. Let me see if I could get Miguel. Okay, so I am still unable to share for some reason. So we'll look at it another time. But I have some questions that I want to ask, and it's basically to, as we summarized earlier, the importance of records and information management. Just, we'll use the chat, and basically the first question is, or your response, you can tell me whether it's yes or no, or whether you're not sure. But my first question to you is, do you believe that the information you create and use every day to do your job is a business asset? I guess since it's only a few of us, you can unmute your mic and give your response. But based on the industry you're in and what you do, I just want to know if you feel that it's an asset for you to have the information you need to do your job.
You can see my answer, Ms. Tucker.
Okay, yeah, I see them.
Okay.
Okay, so the next question is there, how would you respond to this? There's a lot of knowledge and know-how in my head that is not documented. So when I leave, it will leave with me. What's your take on that? Are you a person that documents, or you just orally convey what has to be done? Any thoughts on that one? Are you a person to make sure, and that's one of the efficiencies. If it's documented, you don't have to keep going through the process of going and showing every time. The person has some information already and they know. So that's a plus, definitely. So nowadays we have Office 365, we have Google Docs, SharePoint, Teams. Okay, and the fact that, yeah, these are different tools we use to collaborate. Okay, do they help you organize your documents or file, or you have to do that yourself? How many people use those software? Anyone using Office 365? Because you know that's a cloud-based thing now. We have also Google Docs, you know, everything is pretty much cloud-based. The SharePoint environment, we have anyone using SharePoint or Teams? Anyone? So these are some of the, as we go into the digital environment, in terms of creation and use of our records and information, these are just a few of the softwares that we would come in contact with that result in records. Okay, so the fact that you're using that software, the records still, once they're identified, they have to be put in the appropriate, what we would call repository, so that if it was a meeting on Teams or whatever, you know where to go to access that record if you need to get the information from it.
Okay,
So
Mr.
no one here uses any of those
Yes.
products.
Mr. Carr, yes,
Uh-huh.
yes, I do. I have Teams. I even though I have 365, Outlook
Mhm.
365, I have Teams, but I
Mhm.
have to put the information in.
Mhm.
Yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah, so basically we just need to know that although we're using that software or what have you,
Mhm.
once things meet the criteria that we talked about earlier,
Yeah,
then yeah, we treat it as a record. And so
okay,
it needs to be managed.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed that you can't delete things when,
Yeah.
once you put something there, you
Mm,
make sure that's what you want to say.
yeah. Okay. And then this other thing that's important when we want to talk about information management. Would you say that you were properly trained by your organization and how to name and file the information you create and use every day? Is there a general, what we would call naming convention in terms of the information you create? Do you have file naming conventions that you use? Anyone? So basically, you're in this department, this is your drive. Based on your functions, you have some broad heading folders that you would place your relevant documents in, or how is it done for you?
You want
Anyone
to,
want to,
or we can
anyone?
type it?
Yeah, you can type it in.
Okay,
Yeah, you can type it in. So just in terms of assessing your scenario. So, okay, you're properly trained and that's good. Like I say, sometimes because the importance or the priority isn't there to make sure persons coming in know how to manage the information they create. It's overlooked. And so that's where you end up with your errors, you know. So are you supposed to be saving your work on your on your drive on your computer? Once you already do that, where do you save your work? Were you shown with what repository for your department documents? How to name them in terms of, if okay, you have your what we call your functional headings, and then underneath that, based on the activities, you generate certain types of documents or information. Right, it's not to be saved on your personal drive. Definitely not. Some people say, well, ain't nobody show me nothing, but I have my own way right here and I know where everything is, so don't touch nothing.
that sounds like government.
You know, but that's working against the organization as a whole,
I know.
because yeah, like we said earlier, it's not your information. So
And
there
thank you.
should be some, there should be some
Thank God that
basic
with life and
rules,
death. Exactly.
So with a program in place and awareness, making people aware as they come in, ensuring there's some time within that year that you remind them about the protocols, that's important. Okay, but to do that, you have to have a dedicated team. You have to, and sometimes people saying with their budget, well, they can't afford this and they can't afford to put no full records management unit in place, etc. But you still have to have someone designated within that organization, if you, until such time as maybe you can add additional resources. So in some companies, you would see if they they can't really do that, then they would appoint like a records manager in a key area. So in terms of some of the key areas that you may see, there, or that sometimes you would find persons with record management responsibilities would be like your areas of corporate risk, because one of the important things about records management is it's supposed to help and mitigate those risks. It can also go under legal, because under legal, then you're ensuring compliance, because you know what rules and regulations. And then again, you have some people who would put it under IT, you know, so that means that the technology is there, and ideally it could work when you ensure that whatever systems you're rolling out have record keeping capabilities attached. It could be a plus, you know, but depending on where you place it, there's still some drawbacks in terms of maybe ensuring it gets the right level of priority. So we definitely are building the case for records management as we go through those questions, okay? And do you think that you are personally responsible for managing the information you use every day?
You said something,
Yes. The next question, do you think you are personally responsible for managing the information you use every day? Yes, no, maybe so, not sure.
Yes, personally.
Okay, it definitely is yes. Okay, so that's why the training is so important. Okay, because whatever information you create in the course of doing your duties, resulting in evidence, that's a record, and you're responsible for managing it at the end of the day. So, given that, are you aware of who you can and cannot share information with inside and outside of the organization? Do you, so actually, you could just put up your hands. For the three persons that are here, do you have something in writing that speaks to records management in your organization? Okay, okay. So for those persons who don't, has there been any kind of an interest or any talks with relation to needing a records management program? Grant and Silvera, Jada?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was asking in terms of McDonald's says they have something documented as it relates to records management. So I was asking you, is your organization one that has something in place, or is it being considered, or nothing is being said?
Oh, I'm not sure about if we have
Okay.
something.
All right. So basically, you can do some, I guess, some just a little bit of snooping, just to kind of ask the question with regard to how you, within your organization, in terms of if there are any record keeping procedures or documentation that that exists, or Jada, which area are you in? Because sometimes depending on where you're at, you won't see it blatantly, because like I say, it's a behind the scene activity. And so you definitely would have to have the designation as a what we would call a records coordinator or records liaison. That's a specific responsibility for persons attached to a program, a records management program.
Okay, I'm a teller.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
probably
that's
why.
right. Okay, yeah, that's right. So you wouldn't, yeah, you're upfront, you're servicing the customer. So you're creating that receipt for whatever the transaction is that goes into whatever system you're using in relation. So you're dealing with transactional information.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
ma'am.
true. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Grant, the nature of your work again? I think Miss Grant?
She probably stepped away, but she's doing the same thing as me in our Freeport location. And she
Oh,
also deals with member services.
member services. Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
that's another member services would be something that would also require management of records as well. Okay, all right, so that gives me an idea of where she's at. Okay. So has anyone ever sent out emails with documents attached to the wrong person?
I did before, but I have something on my 365 that I can retrieve it right away
Okay.
and take it back.
Okay. Because like we say, the email itself is supposed to facilitate communication.
Right.
However, the way we use it nowadays is quick to, because we're saying communicating, we're also communicating information that elevates to the status of a record. You know, so you can imagine sending out the wrong information to the wrong person. When the
Right.
goal of records management is to ensure that the right information reaches the right person at the right time. So you don't
Especially
get
if
consequences.
people have the same name, like when you pull up the directory,
Yeah.
you have two Renee, one and around it. It's yeah. So you
Sometimes, right? Sometimes too. That's again in terms of convention and naming. How well, like at our institution, they would use like initials for your first and middle name, and then the last name would be spelled out, you know, but then you still have your little perks if you have two Smiths and the two of them initials is SS, you know,
yeah.
so then you go to something else, you know. So basically the whole gamut of naming conventions, protections, all of these things that you have to develop in your program to ensure that your information can be what we call authentic, reliable, trustworthy, those type of things. Because we said it's an asset, so it's very important that the you know, it's identified properly. Okay. So like I said, the main thing from that first chapter I need you to focus on are those, and I sent you that as a document. Anyone has that with the principles, the record keeping principles? If can somebody go through that right now before we move on. So those principles help us to ensure we formulate our programs properly. Anyone remember the acronym that I said can help you? It's I'll type it in the chat.
I have it, Ms. Tucker,
You have the paper?
a tip card.
Right. Okay, so what does that place spell out in terms of the principles?
Accountability,
Mhm,
transparency,
mhm.
integrity, protection, compliance, availability, retention, and disposition.
Okay, so do you have the little write-up with each one? What levels out to accountability?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Accountability is a senior executive or a person of comparable authority oversees
mhm,
the record-keeping program and delegates program responsibility to
okay,
the individuals.
okay.
Right,
So,
transparency, right, okay.
right. Jada, do you have that information?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I printed it.
Oh, okay, so you can read the next one. What is the T
Integrity.
for? What
Oh, we
she
going.
just did accountability, so you can do the next one.
Transparency. Okay, transparency. An organization's record-keeping process and activities must be documented in an open manner and verifiable manner. Such
Okay.
documentation must be available to employees and appropriate interested parties.
Right, definitely. So that's the integrity that we speak about, especially when you see it comes to under so accountability, transparency, integrity, those will play out a lot in terms of the Freedom of Information Act. So because people are gonna ask questions in relation to those key components. Okay, so Tishelle, you got the little, what would I call them? They were like attachments, little handouts that were to go along with the reading.
I forwarded them to her.
You forwarded it? Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, so we got Farah's, the one you did just now, that was integrity. Okay, so I think what we're gonna do is, McDonald, can you finish the PCA?
Okay, protection, a record-keeping program should be constructed to ensure a reasonable level of protection to records and information that are private, confidential, privileged, secret, or essential to business continuity.
Right, so that's what we were talking about in case of disruptions. Okay,
Right.
so you have in place, and each one of these end up in little what we call sub-programs, because business continuity impacts the physical structure as well as the processes and in place for conducting the business. So the plan is to ensure that should anything disruptive happen, operations can still occur. And you have your procedures in place on who are first line, who you're gonna call first, who you have to get into contact with first, second, third, and then you could prioritize what has to come up first, second, third, etc. Okay, so security and safety comes first, So you got to be checking on your personnel, see where they are and what you need to do that. Your contact list, right?
Yes.
Oh, right. So each component in the program has its own set of details. Okay, so after that, then you have what else?
Compliance,
Right.
compliance. The record keeping program shall be constructed to comply with accountable laws and other binding authorities, as well as the organization's policies.
Okay.
And then availability.
Mhm.
Organization shall maintain records in a manner that ensures timely, efficient, and accurate retrieval of needed information.
Okay, so Jada, you could finish us off with the R and the D.
Okay, retention. An organization must retain records for an appropriate period of time to satisfy legal, regulatory, fiscal, operational, and historical requirements. Disposition. An organization must provide secure and appropriate disposition for records that no longer need to be kept. In this context, disposition may involve destruction of records, transfer of records to another organization as part of a divestiture or other transaction, transfer of records to an archives or other scholarly repository, or transfer of records to clients or other parties who are the subjects of the records.
Okay, and that's like the end of the life cycle. Okay, and that's like when I spoke to you about an archivist being the one that ultimately can establish real historical value. So when you get into the disposition phase, that's pretty much where the records manager's role pretty much ends, because you've managed the records right up to the time that their lifespan ends. And so if the lifespan ends, you destroy it. If it has additional value because of historical reasons, then the records then would be transferred to the archivist. So that disposition phase is that determining whether to destroy or to keep once the whole life cycle comes to an end. So in terms of of comparison to humans, like human lives, you either go to heaven or you go to hell. So they either end up going down and getting shred up or burn up, because depending on the media, some things are shredded, and then
Yeah.
depending on the sensitivity of the information, okay, they may have certain types of requested destruction methods. So for like hard drives, you need a specialized type of equipment to destroy that. So that would be like engaging a third party vendor for destruction of your hard drives, etc. People have strict, because you have dumpster divers. You have people who used to literally go in your trash, and even if you tear something in some big pieces, if they want that information, they'll piece that together to get it. So certain companies, even their shred has stipulations around it. They want it cross-cut. They want different types of things to make sure at the end of the day, the information is gone. Because when you say destroy, that means destroy. That should not come back. So those destruction methods would be based on the media. Okay. So we have that. Did you get through all of the information on preparing the retention schedule or doing the inventory? Because that comes before. And see, basically, we have to know the steps, because you can't create a retention schedule if for number one, you don't have your senior management support and authorization to implement the program. You know, so the order in which their activities occur is also important. Okay, so when you get your senior management buy-ins and support, and you actually create a policy. So that's why I asked that question earlier, because if there is a formalized program, your organization should have a records management policy, or if it's well defined and you like for bigger organizations, they have an information management policy or information governance framework. And so you would have policies for records management, you would have policy for information security, okay, that type of thing. So if you don't have a formal records management policy, you are probably just doing it as in terms of a practice, but to gain the traction you need, definitely there should be a policy in place, because that policy outlines specifically what is the definition of records in your organization. It outlays the roles and responsibilities and all the duties, and also if there are any penalties for infractions, that should also be in place, you know. But without that, it's very difficult to, you know, maintain a consistent process for managing the information. So sometimes people are challenged because they may have one executive who is very much involved and wants to ensure that it is being done through the organization. However, if there's some type of a shift or a change, you can find that that level of support drops, because the now incumbent may not see it as a priority the way the previous person did, you know. But once you get past that formalized program, you know, it kind of gives you something to stand on. Okay, so I know that the chapter relating to the retention, it covers a lot of information. So right now I'm going to prepare some notes that I'll send out before the next class that will primarily focus on the core items you need to know with regard to the retention process. Okay, and like I said, you have to do an assessment. You cannot just develop a records retention schedule out on your head. And it's a collaborative thing, because we've talked about all the relevant components that impact the records scenario in organizations. The fact that if it's evidence for a purpose. Okay, and that purpose may have attached to it other legal and regulatory requirements. Okay, some heavily regulated industries would be like healthcare, in things that relate to industries like oil and gas and the environment. So those type of industries, there's a lot that you have to have documented, and you have to be able to produce because of the regulatory environment. So if you're not organized in terms of having a program in place and making sure staff are aware of the do's and don'ts with regard to the records, it could be very problematic. You could end up in some really nasty situations.
I can imagine those pharmaceutical companies.
Yes, because a lot of their records, they're very long term. As long as
Yeah.
that drug is on the market, and in certain countries, like I say, in the US, people sue they sue on the drop of a dime,
Yeah.
So that's not an industry you go in without having something structured in
Yeah.
terms of managing that information, because you're
Yeah.
dealing with research on not just animals, research on humans,
Yeah.
and for the life of that person, if they were
Mhm.
involved in a study, you have to be able to produce that. So
Yeah.
it's not now, unfortunately, I am unable to share. So I'll have to check with Mr. Pratt, because some of the things that I had to share, I can't, and it would give you more insight into the length and breadth of records management as it's emerging now. Because, like I said, we're basically transitioning. Although a lot of people say they don't think you could ever get rid of paper. Somehow, some way, we're gonna still, but the goal is less paper processes. Okay.
I
So,
think our culture has us with the paper, even though with electronically, we still can't. Well, we got to save it. We got to have it, the hard copy somewhere.
And the thing is, if you're deciding that because digital records are accepted in courts, okay? Your main thing you have to make sure your technology is sound, so that you have highly credible digital signatures, whatever software, whatever you're using, it has the proper encryptions and security around it. Okay, because everything in court deals with authenticity, and so you don't want to get into any dilemmas with regard to the quality of the records you're producing, especially in matters involving the courts. Okay, so it's 8:47, and I really want to make sure we understand that whole concept around the inventory and the retention schedule, and understand the difference. The inventory, because you do the inventory, what you're finding is everything in there in relation to the business transactions, the business processes, etc. But not all of it would relate to records. So that making that distinction on being able to assess if it's a record, because when you go in offices and you inventory, they have forms, but they blank forms, nothing on them. They don't become a record until they are signed, etc. And because we're in this phase where people are what I call in hybrid mode, they have paper and they working electronically. So when you do that assessment and inventory, you're going to identify a lot of things, but not all of them are records. Okay, so at the time of the inventory and the assessment, once you identify those things that elevate to record status, that is what you have on your retention schedule, in addition to who owns it, where is it located, the time frame for keeping it, okay, and its ultimate disposition. Is it for destruction or is it to be archived? So that's that in a nutshell. That's like the product of the inventory, the records retention schedule, which is one of your records management tool. So you have a policy, you do an inventory, which will get you to produce a retention schedule. Okay, and that retention schedule identifies the records, and there are different styles, I would like to say, because you have some retention schedules that are pretty much, the trend is to do them by functions. So depending on the business function, so where you would have finance, HR, okay, you can have something that relates to a department that deals with security. Okay, you have your IT department. So under each of those functions, there are certain activities that come out of that function. And then based on those activities, you generate certain types of records. And that's where you get into the record series, which would also be something that an attachment I had also sent you in terms of understanding the concept of the record series. Okay, and so with record series, there's records that are similar. They're generated from that particular function, and the time frame is generally the same for for keeping them. Okay, so when you apply for a job, okay, that's part of the HR onboarding process. So at that stage, in terms of onboarding as a function, you would have application, you would have references, you would have a resume, you would have maybe your police record, etc. So all of those are in that is the record series underneath that particular, what did I say, function of onboarding. So in terms of how it's done and the terminologies, I don't think, did you get a glossary? No one got like a listing of terms that will show up in this course? If
No,
you
I
didn't
didn't get any.
you didn't get a glossary, right?
No.
Okay, all right, so I'll make sure. So when we discuss it, it wouldn't seem kind of distant. You'd basically understand it. So some of the terms we've talked about so far would be the life cycle concept. Okay, it would also relate to records and non-records based on the chart. Okay, and then also we'll get into structured and unstructured, because we're dealing with electronic records as well. Okay, so the structured records would be those records that are within a type of system like a database. And so they have some metadata there in terms of the fields and the information. It's organized. Your unstructured information would be the Word document you create and save. Okay, you could have an Excel spreadsheet, you could have a PowerPoint presentation, and it's a record because it was a presentation that you would have had to do in your role as the records coordinator for that particular department. So part of your function would have been to present an overview of records management within your unit or area for new people coming in or something like that. So that presentation itself would be a record. But where are you putting it? Is that something you have just in your little slot of personal drive information, when actually that needs to go into your department records management file or something like that? Okay, so things to ensure that you get would be my summary notes. with regard to the inventory and the records retention schedule, the purpose and some of the key details required for that. Okay, and I will send you the glossary of terms in relation to the course. So that would be content information with regard to the various topics we're going to cover remaining. And also I will send you, because we should have about maybe about 4 exercises. And so what I'll do is I'll send them out, and by the end of the course, all of them should come back to me for grading. So initially I was gonna just turn them in the week before, but they would all focus on the different, like this first chapter where we went over the business case for records management. So there would be questions in relation to that. And then there would be some other questions in relation to what we will be covering next week with regard to the whole process involved in getting a retention schedule. So is that okay?
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. All right, so, and I'll also send the remaining chapters, but I need you to read them so that the concepts that you still have issues with understanding, we can clarify that while we have the discussion for the class time. Or you could send me an email as you go through if there's something, and so then I would be able to address that when we meet.
Ms. Tucker, can you make sure that I'm in your email list, please? Because I didn't get your email tonight with the class link, not the cancellation of class last week. Ms. Frank had to forward it to
you
me.
know who sends that? Miguel. But I'll make sure I'll let him know you're in class with us.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
but he normally sends out the class link.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
but it's a recurring link. So if the one you got it.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure you have my emails for when you send the notes.
Oh, you put it in.
Okay.
Put it in the chat right now so I could write that down next to the attendance thing what I have.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, then give me it right now, so I can send that in there. Yeah, but it's a recurring link, so we join on the same link each time. You already did? Oh, okay, yeah, I see it. No, Silvera, Jada, but I'm looking, that's Jada, you didn't get it, or I'm thinking it's Grant. I'm thinking, but this Jada's email.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, so you didn't get the message for the last class you were saying?
No, ma'am. The only emails I got were the ones you sent after the first class.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. So I'll make sure. But the link is the same. The link is the same. It's always the recur. So even if I think with the last group, they wanted like a study session. So even after we were finished, we just came on to that link and we were able to do our study session. Okay, so everyone have a enjoyable weekend. Okay, and it's a long read, and terminologies, like I said, you may not be familiar with. So take it in phases based on how many pages. Just target yourself so that we can, and like I say, you can send me emails with any questions so that when we come on Thursday, we can clarify those or discuss them right away so that that is clear. Right now, I really need you to make sure you understand the principles that apply, because I will also send you the maturity ratings, and you can look at that and basically rate your organization, okay? Whether you're what they call on the border, whether you're transformational, or whether you don't have any of the components. And so basically that would be like a level 1. So make sure, let me know, but definitely the things that we need to get out of the course is to understand what it is, to understand those principles, why it's a benefit, our life cycle concept, okay, and be able not just to say what each principle is, but to give that little blurb around what it means. So is that clear?
Yes, clear as mud.
Oh my gosh. No, you're gonna get it. And then you wouldn't want to see you all well, how shall I say it? Pull in rank when you all get back.
You know that,
We
right?
need to have this. We need to have this. Why is this not? What? That's all. That's all in getting armed with the knowledge, you know. So, like I say, take care. Have a great weekend, and pace yourself with the readings. Make sure if there are any questions you want discussed, priority, send me that in the email. Okay, and I will make sure you get your vocabulary listing. I have something made up, not necessarily the ones in the book, some additional terms in case they may not have those. Okay, so that when you're reading, it's there should be a section with vocabulary in the back. If there are any other terms, then I guess I would also add those. But it's an important component. It doesn't always get the respect it deserves, but once you know what it entails and what the benefits are, you will definitely appreciate the need to ensure that your organization has a records management program in place. It depends on resources. Some people are lavish. Some people can afford to have a records manager, records assistants, what we call analysts, okay? And based on those job titles would determine what your responsibilities are. So somebody like with the title or designation records analyst, you would primarily find them engaged in doing these type of assessments. So they would be the ones to help with the design of the retention schedule. They would be the ones that do the monitoring and reporting with regard to or changes, because records based on like I say, the business process, there's things that may change. And so certain records, you may not create them anymore. And so there's that ongoing process of making sure the information is credible and it's up to date. And that's something that you would basically find a records analyst doing. I'll check on why I'm unable to share, and failing that, what I would probably have to do is send you the link to the videos, and then you can provide your feedback when we meet. So good night, all.
Okay, good night and stay
Good
safe.
night. All righty. You too. Take care.
Good night.
Yeah.
Bye.